Hey, it's Marcus with Retro Game Players. Thanks for tuning in. This video is taking place from my micro arcade, and behind me you'll see quite a few of my computers that I've amassed over the years. There's actually some down here that I'll show you in a second. But these are all really old computers. Some of them have some newer parts. But basically, this video, the whole point of this video is because of this game right here. And this game, Grand Theft Auto 5 on PC, which is just a massive game. I mean, we're talking 7 DVDs in this puppy. I mean, this is absolutely insane. So, essentially what's going on is the computer that I use to record my footage is pretty new, you know. It was all bought in August of 2014. And at the time, I bought an AMD chipset instead of Intel, and I got the top of the line FX2 chipset CPU, which I can't remember the exact model, but it was the top of the line in August of 2014. And I also got at the time a GTX 750, I think it's a TI, which is a 2 gigabyte, you know, DDR3 video card. And it's been really great for a lot of what I need to do, which is video editing, a lot of gameplay footage, you know, and I'm still figuring out how to get the best recording out of my PC games. So for example, the Serious Sam playthrough, you know, my frame rates are all over the place, and in the end it actually turned out that that had to do with the way I was capturing the footage from my computer. So it wasn't even a problem there in terms of, you know, my CPU struggling to, you know, do a job. But essentially what happened is, you know, this happens every so often with a computer, but this game, you know, I installed it, and it took 60 gigs. I do have an SSD hard drive, you know, which is great, and, you know, installed it, started to play it, and when I played it, I was hitting 60 frames per second out in the country and all that, but as soon as I started driving in through the city, my frame rate would drop to 30 frames per second, which is totally fine. But for a lot of my videos, I'm trying to hit 60 frames per second on a recording basis, and that includes, you know, Super Nintendo and Sega Saturn and, you know, PS3, all of that. I'm trying to capture 60 frames per second. And while I haven't really hit the 1080p mark with those, that's really not because I can't do it. It's actually just because it's just a lot for size-wise. And so I've been recording at 720p. At some point, I might make the switch to 1080p and start doing that, but lately I've just been doing 720p because it's, you know, like half the file size. And really, you know, the time to render that and the time to upload it and all that is just like cut in half. So I still think it looks really good. So anyway, basically this game, what happened is when I started to actually record the gameplay footage as I'm playing it on the same computer, my frame rate would, you know, basically hover around 30, and then when I get to the city, it would drop to about 14, 15 frames per second. So I started doing some research, and I was like, well, maybe I'll just upgrade my CPU, which is an easy thing to do. You know, AMD, I figure I can go out and get a next level up or a few levels up, because I could tell that it was something to do with my CPU. Well, sadly, I realized that the CPU that I had purchased in August was the top-of-the-line AMD FX2 chip available. So they haven't produced anything else. And so after calling around and figuring out what's really going on, it turns out that AMD is pretty much giving up on CPUs, and they're just gonna do GPUs, which is the graphics side. So in essence, I was forced with two things. One, I upgrade my computer, which means I put in a new Intel motherboard and an Intel, you know, i5 or i7 chip. But in order to do that, you typically have to reinstall Windows, and I have all my programs set up, everything's set up to record, you know, and it works great. Or what I do is I just build a whole other box, and I play the game on that and record the footage into my other computer. And it's kind of nice to have two computers when you're editing anyway, because one can do some rendering while the other one can be used for recording new footage, and you can kind of cycle back and forth. So I thought maybe that was a good way to go. Now I like to do things as cheap as possible. I'm not the kind of guy to just go out and spend as much money on something as I can. So instead what I do is I'm out here in the graveyard because I'm going to be grabbing a couple parts namely a power supply that I have out here that's a 500 watt power supply. I can't remember the name of the brand that it is, but it's a name brand power supply and it should do what I want. I'll show you the parts that I got here in a little bit for the new computer build, but I thought maybe I'd show you some of the old computers that I have out here too, and just whatever, talk about their history, and some of them, you know, it's kind of interesting, some of them not so much. But anyway, the other thing that was really weird to me is that I read a couple hardware reviews on Grand Theft Auto 5, and it basically said that the FX2 chipsets are slower than the i3, Intel i3 processors. So I couldn't even believe that. I'm like, the FX2 chip that I just bought in August is slower than an i3 when playing Grand Theft Auto 5. So basically, you know, I'm looking at a minimum of an i5 and potentially an i7. So I'll just tell you right now, I went with an i7, and I'll show you more of those parts as we go. I'm also going to build that computer and just kind of film it and talk about, like, you know, some of the things that I picked up, and, you know, whatever, why I chose them, that kind of stuff. So let me go ahead and show you some of these computers behind me, as you know, some of them are pretty interesting. All right, let's start by talking about these two Mac Pluses. So one of these is a little bit upgraded from the other, and these are actually the very first computers that I've ever played on and played games on. So these to me are basically as nostalgic as I can possibly get in terms of PC gaming or Mac gaming. And these things are really cool. So we're actually going to be doing some Let's Plays and complete playthroughs of some really classic Mac games in the future. So I'm just planning on getting these set up. This is actually an external 4 GB drive right here. That's a SCSI drive. So I'll be able to put all the Mac software on there and basically load that thing totally up. So that's what these are. Over here, this is these are 3 different computers that are actually relatively okay, except for the blue one. And the blue one is the coolest one, I'll tell you why. It's actually, and that was no pun intended, but you'll see it actually says coolants on it. And this is a liquid-cooled chassis, which is really old and super funky. So I'll try and pull it around here and show you the remnants. So here's the liquid-cooled beast, which is just thrashed. I mean, this thing's a total piece of crap. Up top here, which is kind of hard to see, is the radiator. So there's a radiator up there, which has a bunch of fans on top, as well as a you know, type of cooling system. And you can see it's got the AMD 64 Athlon badge on there. Look at that, just falls off. The door just falls off. So this is like a total piece of crap. I've had this for a long time. I do need to pull a disk drive out, so there's a chance that I might grab this disk drive out of here just because I need one. But let me look. So it's not SATA, it's an IDE one, so I probably won't be taking that one. But look at this thing. You can see that goes on the CPU. It actually has one for the GPU down here. All this fluid here is actually still liquid, and you can see it spilled out too at one point. And then over here it looks like there was a reservoir that kind of overflowed. So I never used this. This was actually one that a friend of mine sold me, and then I actually sold it to another guy who had it for a couple years. But basically it's just a total piece of crap, and I don't really even care about it. This one's just a standard Dell. But again, it's got a DVD RW in there, so I'll probably end up taking that one out. This one is actually a pretty cool case. I've had this forever, and I do music recording, and so this was my primary audio editing computer, and I used it for a long time. So it's basically sitting out here. It does have 2 80 gig, 15,000 RPM SATA drives in there, which even to this day are pretty fast. It's, you know, they're not like transferring at the rate of like SATA 3, but the speed of the drives themselves is pretty impressive. So over here we've got an iMac, which I've kind of done a few things too, but we'll be using that for some gaming at some point. But these things drive me crazy. I hate the plastic construction and everything. This one's pretty cool. This is a Sony Vaio case with some cool parts inside. So you know, I might use this a little bit. I'm not sure, but that's not where the power supply is. And then this is my old, actually this is like my old desktop that I used for a long time. And it's not really a Think Center, which is like a Lenovo. Inside of here are a lot of custom parts, but I might take this drive out. We'll see. Which depends on which one's the best. Here's another Vostro Dell, which was just given to me. And then over here we've got 3 extremely crappy Dells. And what I like to do with these Dells is I like to use them as the guts for MAME cabinets, and you know, just to build them in different configurations. So my plan is to make a few different types of MAME cabinets, and that's kind of something that I just enjoy doing kind of as a hobby. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and pull the power supply, most likely out of this Lenovo, and then also grab a drive, a DVD drive. I don't know if I'm gonna grab this one. If I remember right, this one has issues burning where it makes coasters from time to time, so I don't want to use that. All right, so these are the 2 computers that I'm going to plagiarize their parts from. The one on the right has the 500 watt power supply that I'll be stealing, and the one on the left has a pretty nice looking DVD RW that is a SATA model. So I'm going to go ahead and take these out and use them in the new system build. So we'll start with the DVD RW drive. See if my screwdriver fits. It does. One thing I like about this screwdriver is that it's magnetic, and so that's something that, you know, for any system build is just so huge. Also, it has a telescoping kind of connector, which is pretty cool too. So this actually extends quite a bit, and you can use that. Now, one thing when using magnetic, you know, anything magnetic around electronics is that you have to be very careful not to touch things like memory or CPU or hard drives or anywhere on the motherboard at all. So whenever you're using something like this, you need to be very precise and only grab the screws that you're going for. But it is really, really handy, especially when building a computer. Okay, got my SATA cable, my power cable, and see there's some kind of rail on here, I think. I might have to take the other side off to get the rest out of there. And nope, so might have to take the front piece off. We'll see. See if it just comes off here. And no, oh, yep, there we go. So the front part's been removed, and now the drive easily comes out. So we've got the first part. All right, here's the one with the power supply I'll be taking. This one's gonna be dusty, so I'm gonna clean it out after I get it all out of here. And I don't know if you can see this, but this is an older gaming computer. Again, it's AMD. Looks like an Asus motherboard, and the chip, I think that's a 9800 GT graphics card. Pretty sure that's what that is. So still a pretty good gaming card. It's just kind of not really this generation. Now, if I have any problems with this 500 watt power supply, I'll have to upgrade, but I figured, you know what, I'm gonna give it a shot first, see if I can't pull it off. One thing that's nice about this is an Antec 500 watt, is that the all the connectors come right out of here. They actually come out of the back of the power supply. So they actually plug, they come right out of here like that, which is pretty cool. So you can actually use the type of connectors that you want to use for your build. So see how it just comes out like that. So it's basically ready. It is free and clear. Whoa, it's dusty. It's gonna require some cleaning, but it should be good. It's got a fan in the front, fan in the back, So I'm gonna clean the crap out of that thing. So I'm gonna use an air duster on this and get it all cleaned up, and then we'll go ahead and show you the rest of the parts that I'm working with. Behold, the parts for the new computer. So I've laid out the parts that I have purchased for this computer, and I'll just go through them real quickly and some of the other things that you may need when building a computer. But with that said, I want to start off by just giving a disclaimer. You know, this video is not intended for learning purposes, but you may learn some things watching me, so that's okay. I just want to let you guys know this is my first i7 I've built. And you know, I've built a lot of computers in my day. I started professionally working building computers and fixing computers actually in '96 and up, so I've been doing this a long time. I've built literally thousands of computers, literally thousands, including assembly line style, and then lots of servers, lots of, you know, gaming machines, all that kind of stuff. So a lot of the stuff that I'm going to be doing is just typical stuff that I would do when I build a computer. So some of it will be like best practices, and you know, I'll mention little tips as I go, but really just keep in mind that this is really just kind of an informational video for those of you who want to see how a system's put together with some pretty cool parts. So these are definitely not the most cutting edge parts at all. You saw that I grabbed the power supply from an old dusty computer. I did actually take my time and clear out most of the dust from that unit by removing the different fan covers on each side of the power supply and really cleaning each fan. And you know, I also took that DVD-ROM, the DVD-RW from that other system. So, you know, even though this stuff is pretty expensive, there's boards that are like twice this much, and there's CPUs that are twice this much or 3 times this much, and same thing with the video card. So I went with bang for the buck, you know, given this point in time right now when the system is being built. So as of today, it's late April 2015. So that's when all this stuff is, you know, pretty current. So first off, I'll just go with the CPU. So the CPU is an Intel i7, and I believe it's the 4790K, or also known as the Devil's Canyon chip. So this is a very, very good CPU. It's got, I believe, 8 megabyte of cache on board built in, so that's going to be essential for a lot of, you know, high-end games and stuff. Now, what I read about GTA 5, which again, this is really what this is all for, and I love this kind of stuff anyway, but GTA 5 runs great on an i5 processor. So an i7 apparently really gets you just a little bit more of a boost. I don't know, I don't have an i5 to test, so I think I have an i5 laptop, but I'm not about to do that. So anyway, so this is what we're gonna use as our main brain there. And then the motherboard that I went with is an Asus Z97-A. This is the newer version of this, slightly. It does have USB 3.1, but I have no idea. I mean, I'm not gonna be using 3.1. I don't have any 3.1 devices yet. Maybe in the future, but for now, you know, nothing. But this is the board we're going to use. The memory is just a couple sticks of 4 gigs, so it's basically going to be 8 gig total. And you know, the reason I did that is because I can always upgrade to 16 at a later time very easily. So this board has 4 slots, I think, at least 4. But 4 slots, so this is going to occupy 2 of those slots, and it's going to give me a total of 8 gigs. And this is Corsair Vengeance Pro series, and it actually will run at 1866 megahertz, and it's DDR3, I believe. Yes, DDR3, so it's not DDR4, but it should be pretty good. And there is something that I think I have to turn on in the BIOS to enable it to run this speed at the 1866. So that's the RAM that I got. I've got a Samsung Evo 850, and this is the 250 gig SSD hard drive. Amazing to me how cheap these have gotten, and I think that this is the exact drive that I have in my other computer that I use for, you know, playing all my PC games and recording all of my consoles. And it's great. It's very fast, and it's just amazing how cheap these SSDs have gotten. Over here, I've just got a standard HDMI cable, nothing fancy. It is a high-speed HDMI, and I actually picked up another one at a local cable store where they just sell cables basically. And so I picked up, I think it's a 10-foot HDMI, whatever the latest version is, and so I'll probably use that. And my plan is to basically have the output go right into my other computer and record that footage from Grand Theft Auto, which should be 60 frames per second. And you know, maybe down the road I'll install software on this computer and try and capture it as I play. But for now, I'm going to treat this almost like a console where it's being fed into my other computer, and that's going to process the footage, because that computer can do that. It just can't handle the gameplay at the same time. So the other thing is the video card, which is a GTX 970. This is a 4 gigabyte model. The video card that I have over in this computer is a 2 gigabyte model, and it is a GTX 750 Ti, I believe. So this is a 4 gig, much faster. One thing that was cool, it's not a huge deal to me, but I got a free game, Witcher 3, so that came with this card. And the last game that I got for free with my old one was Thief, and I still haven't played that, but I really like the old Looking Glass version of Thief. So Thief 1, I just love that game. So this is going to be a pretty good card. It's definitely the best bang for the buck right now. If you want the 980, the price shoots up like, I don't know, a third or maybe even 50% more. It's really expensive. So this is as high as you can go without, you know, really breaking the bank. So that's the components, and I've got a case over here which I'll show you in a second, and that's a Thermal Master, Thermal Take, and it's the Commander MSI Snow Edition. So it looks pretty cool. It looks like a stormtrooper or something. In front of me I have a couple other things that just from experience are useful. This is just a little cup where I can put all the screws and all the different parts that I use to assemble as I go. And then I've got a pair of pliers which are going to be used to cut zip ties of various sizes. I've got a few different sizes here, and that just helps me keep the system looking clean and you know, kind of just tidy, neat and tidy. So that's my goal there. So those are just the required things. Then I've got my screwdriver, which I showed you, which does have a magnetized tip. A couple other things: when you're building a computer, you typically don't want to be on carpet, and you don't want to be conducting anything in terms of static electricity, because that can really hurt components like this. So in order to proceed with building something, you don't want to be standing on carpet. You want to be standing on something that's not really you know, going to generate static electricity. And if you do have static electricity, you know, it's a good idea to constantly touch something that's metal or something that's grounded to dissipate that energy, and then that way you can't really fry the components. They do make little wrist straps that tie to a bench. I never use those, but that's really what, you know, you should be using if you're, you know, in like a factory or something, but whatever. And you know, I will say this, I'm kind of crazy when it comes to building computers. I'll do it wherever. I'll build a computer anywhere. I'll build a computer on a boat. I'll build a computer on a jet ski. I don't give a shit where it is, you know, a ski lift. I don't care. I'm gonna build a computer. And I always make sure that I am grounded before I touch anything, because if you even touch something with some static electricity that's built up, that can be enough to really damage those components. So, all right, so without further ado, I'm gonna start unboxing this stuff. I'm gonna set the case up on this table. I'm gonna position the camera a little bit better, and I'm gonna basically start going through you know, the different components. And the first thing that I'll do as well is I usually get the motherboard prepped. So I'll probably do that first. I'll open the box up, I'm gonna mount the CPU, and I'm gonna put the RAM in it. Back in the day, you used to have to do a lot of jumper settings on the motherboard itself. And these days you don't really need to do that. So we'll see if that's still the case for this, but you know, as of the last like 10 years, you haven't had to really change anything on the motherboard. You just put the CPU in and it auto detects what speed it's supposed to run at and all that stuff, unless you're overclocking, but I'm not overclocking. All right, let's go ahead and open up the motherboard and the CPU and the RAM. Let's get that all installed. So let's go ahead and check out the motherboard first. It is taped, which is always a scary sign, as though it's been opened, but got my crazy Batman knife. And yeah, it looks pretty good. Looks like it's generally new, so that's encouraging. right, so there she is. Looks pretty good. It's definitely got a lot of good connectivity on there. Also, I'm going to be setting up a gigabit LAN setup too, to be able to transfer video from one computer to the other. So I do have a gigabit switch, which is going to be able to transfer pretty good speeds for video. This is the I/O shield, goes on the case. These are different adapters, so you can basically plug in like a USB or whatever, and they actually look like they're also for the case, the front of the cases. So like the LEDs, the power switch, on and off, that kind of stuff. Hard drive indicator. I'm not sure what that is. I think that's a slide cable. So that's if you want to run 2 video cards at once. Standard SATA cable. Another SATA cable here. There's actually a couple of them in there. And then we've got our book and our manual, and then our driver disc, which just fell on the ground. So I'm going to go ahead and put this cardboard insert back in here like that, and I'm going to set this puppy in there like that. Let's do the CPU. So here's our box CPU, and there's my chip. There's usually a sticker here, which is pretty cool, so you can put that on your case if you want, to kind of show off that you've got the CPU there, which I usually do. Whatever brand CPU your Alliance is with. For desktop computers, I mean, I usually would go AMD, but I'm a little bit burnt at this point because, as I said in the beginning of the video, I was really hoping to just upgrade my chip, and I was pretty bummed to find out that I had the best one there was. All right, so this is the fan, which honestly, you know, feels pretty weak and isn't that great. I might upgrade that at some point. And there's our chip. Usually what I do is take the bag from the case and just put all the junk in there, use it like a garbage bag. But I did this one first. And then I also actually take all my manuals, so like this Intel one and any manuals, I put them all together and I keep them with the motherboard box. All right, so I've got my chip ready here. I need to take out this dummy card, so that's what I'm gonna do now. This comes up and pulls out, and this piece kind of pops off there. There is instructions, install processor first, then remove and keep the cover. Whoops, so I failed right there, didn't I? Delicately take this out. Processors are usually keyed, so it's kind of hard to see, but there's a little triangle right there. That usually means pin 1. So on the board, there's a spot that's highlighted, which indicates pin 1. So in theory, that should just kind of fit in there, just like that. So basically, it just forces good contact. There we go. And that chip is now installed. The CPU fan comes with thermal paste built in. So this thermal paste is high conducting of heat. And this is actually a copper core that you see on the fan itself. And copper's really good at conducting and dissipating heat. So this heatsink compound here works really well to transfer that heat from the CPU directly to this, and then the fan helps blow that off. So there's our CPU fan plug-in. So I'm probably gonna have to do that to remove it. Not a big deal. And then kind of decide which way I want to orientate it. It doesn't really matter. And then the way these work is that usually you put them in there's 4 different holes, there's 4 different prongs, and you basically put them in and push, and it should connect okay. So we'll see if that actually works. So I pushed, now I'm twisting, so that one's locked in. Now I'm going to do this other side over here. There it goes, and then I'm going to twist, so that's locked in. So now I've done these 2, now I'm going to go ahead and do this side. I always try to do this. Oh, That's not good. My CPU fan just budged on me. That's not good. So this is why I did the whole disclaimer thing too. So basically you only twist these when you're removing them, which is so stupid to me because I just didn't think that was the case. As I said, I usually buy AMD, and you know, this design's been here forever. I mean, I've seen that. And actually, you know, as I'm like looking at it, it's like this, it's a good thing I noticed that too, because the wire was actually restricting how the fan could move. So you don't want that either. So you push it down with the arrows the way I have it. So you don't actually rotate them all. You actually don't rotate them at all. The part with the screwdriver just says how to remove it. So that's not what you want to do. I like to go and give my cables a bit of a twist like that. Kind of just like so. So there's the CPU. It's now installed. Looks good. You know, back in the day on some of the old CPUs, there was just a crazy CPU fan assemblies that they've come up with over the years. So it's nice to see that it's gotten easier. Okay, got the RAM. Okay, now for the RAM, typically you want to install these in the certain slots here. So, okay, so the manual says to put it into one into A2 and the other one into B2, which is fine. So we're gonna go and do that. Pretty cool looking RAM modules here. So we're just gonna pull these little arms aside. There we go. So there's A2. Now these, you always want to make sure that they're seated properly, because you can put some stress on the board when you're pushing these in. So just always push straight down. You want to be real firm and support the board from underneath if possible. You can use something flat, kind of like this motherboard box, but that flexes when you push. So one side, then the other. So that was pretty good. All right, so we've got our RAM and our CPU installed. What I'm gonna do now is I'm actually gonna set this aside and get the case ready. A couple things, when you're unboxing a case, that's one of the biggest generators of static electricity, because you know there's styrofoam, and styrofoam for whatever reason just really loves static electricity. So when you take it out of the box, be prepared to get shocked on something, and be prepared to dissipate that before you touch anything else. So this did have a ton of static electricity when I first unboxed it. And then also here's the bag, which I usually just use, you know, as like a garbage bag for all the other parts. You know, anything I need to throw in there that's kind of handy. So, you know, for example, this weird plastic, you know, like that. I mean, just whatever. Perfect for my garbage bag. And pull this up and out of there. I'm gonna go and take these two thumb screws and put them in my little jar, my dish. Inside, you'll always find a bag of screws as well, so go ahead and remove that. And what I'm gonna do is dump the contents into my little Petri dish here. There's another little bag. There we go. So everything's easy to get to now. Okay, the next thing I like to do is to just take a look at the I/O panel, which is going to be, you know, all kinds of stuff from the USB, front audio, power LEDs, all that stuff. And just kind of take a look at it, see what we're working with. These are actually some of the most annoying things to ever hook up on any system build. And I'm glad that they're getting, you know, easier. Like this is pretty easy. This is, you know, hard drive, or sorry, HD audio. This is like old school audio here. And then these are the ones that always have just driven me crazy. And I like to get them kind of twisted, and then what I'll do is I'll set the board up here and plug them in. However, there are these little pieces, which I haven't seen before, and it looks like these are kind of little quick connectors, which is really cool. So I can plug it into this little quick connector and then plug the quick connector into the motherboard. So what I'm gonna do now though, is I'm gonna actually go ahead and install the power supply. And it's interesting, but the power supply is located on the bottom of this beast, which is different. You know, usually the power supplies are located up top. So power supply is going in on the bottom. Here's my 500 watt Antec power supply, which, you know, I removed from that other computer. One thing that kind of sucks about this is that there isn't a fan up here or below it or anything. And so this vent that's on the case down here is not going to be utilized really for cooling. I do have another 500 watt, actually I have two other 500 watt power supplies with big fans here. But you know, I kind of stopped digging as soon as I saw this Antec one. So that's what we're gonna go with. So hopefully that's something I won't regret. These are keyed a certain way. So when you install them, you know, there's 4 screws on the back here. And this one, there's always one that's a little offset. And that screw hole will match up against the case. So I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of put this in here. Okay, so this power supply, actually, even though it's 500 watts, does not want to fit in this case. And that's because I think that the newer style 500 watts or higher power supplies, the newer power supplies are a little bit shorter of a form factor. So they're actually like about that long or so. And that's preventing this from fitting in there, which is really crazy. So I'm actually going to go out to the graveyard and see if I can't rummage up a smaller power supply, which I know I have one. So I'm gonna go do that now, and I'll be back with a cleaned up, different power supply. Also, that other power supply hopefully will have a big fan here, which will utilize this vent. So, all right, so here I go. I'm gonna go get the other one. I'll be back. Okay, so in the garage, I found this power supply, which is in fact smaller as far as a form factor. So it's a smaller form factor, still a good brand, Cooler Master, 500 watt. It also has this big fan here. So this is the one I should have grabbed, which is funny too, because this was actually just sitting underneath that shelf and it was already out. So anyway, I put the old one back, and I did take a picture for comparison, which I'll show you right now. So you can see that it's actually a little bit smaller, which will enable it to fit in this case. All right, so let's go ahead and put this in. This one should not have a problem. And again, we've got one screw that's kind of offset. So go ahead and try putting it in, and wow. That is a tight fit, let me tell you what. The way that that's snapped in there, holy crap. I'm glad I didn't have a finger in the way. All right, so a couple things. I'm not really gonna be able to show this in detail, but I'll try my best. So in here, there's really 3 types of screws. I mean, I'm not sure, there's some other miscellaneous ones in here too. But this one is like a coarse thread screw, and this is usually used for hard drives. And you can use it for the case. Let's see if they give us actual case screws. So this is what I like to call a case screw. It's the same kind of thread. It's coarse, but it has kind of a hexagonal type of top to it versus the round. And so this one is usually used for, like, I use it to mount the motherboard. If possible, if there's enough. If not, I'll use these other ones. And then there's also another one in here that's fine threads. And this is used for some things like your optical drives, like CD-ROM or DVDs. And then depending, possibly the SSD drive as well. So I'm not sure if this case has a spot to mount the SSD, because it's actually, like, you know, it's small. It's like 2.5 inches, and these bays here are 3.5 inches, so it's going to be an inch short. And then up here is 5.25 inch, so like CD-ROMs and that kind of stuff, or DVDs. But I'll see if there's a spot to mount the SSD. If not, I'm just going to mount it on the side. So to attach the power supply, I'm going to go ahead and use 4 of the coarse screws. And I'm going to use the case ones. So I'm going to use the ones with the hexagonal top. Also, while I was in the garage, I found another case fan, which is going to be nice. This is a very large case fan, and I can mount that in a few different spots in here if I want. I'm not sure if I'll actually use it or not right now, but I can use that, which is cool. So I might save that for later. Also, usually you don't want to over tighten the first screw you put in, just to allow for movement as you do the rest, because you want to be able to kind of slide the power supply around to align all the 4 holes. Once you get the 3rd one in, you can pretty much start tightening. So I've got 4 in. I'm going to go ahead and tighten them up. Okay, power supply installed. Next, I'm going to do the DVD drive. I just like to get this stuff out of the way. So here's my top bay right here. There is just a shield that I'm going to pop out. See if I can show that. So the whole case front comes off to take this piece off where the drive is going to go. And here it is. Kind of getting it bent a little bit, but I don't really care. I'll never use it. And, you know, really, some people don't even need a drive like this anymore. I mean, it's just not something that a lot of software companies, like, for example, you know, are all digital downloads and stuff, but I really need my disk drives. Now, the other thing that's interesting about this is there is a little device that I guess is some kind of twist thing. I'm not really sure how this works. So looks like it goes in there and then you twist it and it somehow tightens it, I guess. So let's try it out. So I'm going to put it in through the front first and see if that works. Okay, so that worked pretty good. So it's flush there. And so now here's the drive over here. And let's just see what this thing is. I don't have any idea what this thing is, but so that's in there, that's attached. I basically just put that in and twist it and it's locked in. So I don't even need to put screws in that. You know, I could to make sure it's really, you know, tight or whatever and not vibrating, which sometimes disk drives do, but you know, I'm okay with that. That looks fine to me. So, all right. Next step, get the motherboard ready for placement. So right now I'm just going to take all of the front panel stuff and separate it from the power supply. I'm going to try and just kind of dangle all the power cords outside of the case for now. Here we go. This is the large case fan. Put that over here. All right. So here's my front panel stuff. I'm going to take the motherboard and instead of just setting it in here like this, what I'm going to do actually is take a piece of cardboard like this like that and set it up on there very carefully. I want it to be nice and flat, but that cardboard just keeps it from shorting out while I'm working on it. So as long as it's pretty stable, that's good. So here's the front right here, this tiny little piece. So where my thumb is, that's where the I/O shield connector is gonna go. And I shouldn't say I/O shield, it's the I/O front panel. So this is where the front panel goes, right here on the corner of the board. So if I put this on here, it's keyed, it'll only go one way. But it makes it a lot easier. And then this is just a USB one. Okay, I'm rotating the board a little bit because I can't actually get to the ports I need to. So right here is going to be HD audio. This may not be used. I don't think we're going to actually use that. So here's my little front panel connectors with all the lights and stuff. So what I'm going to do is take this tiny little piece and I'm going to hook it up now to it. So basically when you're hooking this up, at least for this portion, anything that's white is ground. So basically, let's see, we've got reset, so it tells me reset and then ground. So I'm hooking that up like that. That's correct. The power LED, that's the power switch, power SW's power switch. Here's the power LED, it's two different pieces. So again, it says power LED, so that's the blue, and then ground would be the white piece. Like that. Hard drive LED is the orange one. I'm going to go ahead and give this a little twist too to kind of keep them together. So there's my hard drive LED. I hooked up the power LED to the wrong spot, so I just wasn't paying attention there. So I'm going to move this, there we go, to the back. So those are the power LED ones, just like that. Okay, so that's good, and then this one is the switch. Black is ground in this case. Okay, so I'm pretty sure that this is, I mean, it does say USB on it. I'm guessing it's going to go on one of these. I'm just not sure which one. This is a case where the case manual doesn't really match up with the motherboard, so you kind of have to just figure it out. But I'm going to go and plug it into one of the USBs, and it's going to go on the bottom. So I'm going to go and do this one, and that seems right to me. So these are all USB 2.0, so I think that's what that is, because this goes to the front, that's 3.0. So that's just a 2.0 USB port, I believe. Yep, so on the front of the case, you can see that there's a black port, which is for USB 2.0, and the blue is 3.0. So, okay. So that's good. So now I've got this thing. I'm gonna go and give it another good twist here, just to kind of make it run a little tight. And this is gonna install all together now, which is actually pretty convenient. Alright, so that's installed. This USB 3.0, I'm not going to be able to plug that in until I get it closer and mounted in the case. Same thing with the chassis fan. Alright, so the next part is the I/O shield. This is used to ground the motherboard to the chassis. And these are unique to each motherboard, so it's very important you have this because it's keyed exactly to whatever your motherboard's output ports are. And if you don't have it, then basically, I don't know, you might have a used board or something, but basically it comes in from the inside and you kind of pop it into place. Usually the four corners And depending on how nice your case is, this is either a total pain in the ass or it just works. So right now, this is pretty good. It's kind of being a little stubborn. It's not popping in, but there we go. I got 3. Oh, there we go. All right, so the I/O shield's good. So now that the I/O shield is installed, it's time to put the motherboard inside of the case. The only thing that I like to do here is just confirm that any posts are going to be lining up correctly. So inside the case, this one looks like it's set up just fine. It already has these raised spots where each screw is going to go on the board. That's not always the case, no pun intended, but sometimes the crappier cases, you have to put in your own little posts. And here's an example of one here. So this is a really small one, I know, but that's an example where you would screw it in place. Like if you're using a smaller form factor, this is called a full-size ATX board, but sometimes you'll use a micro or a mini, and those will have different holes, and so you'll actually have to put like this post, like where my finger is here. If this was a micro ATX board, you would put this post there, and that post would basically help ground the board. Sometimes people will build their own computers and they won't use those, and they risk really just frying the board because, you know, I mean, at the bottom of this motherboard is just all metal connectors, and if you, you know, put that on a flat metal surface and give it power and turn it on, it's gonna fry. So, okay. So now that I'm ready, I'm gonna go ahead and remove the cardboard, and I'm gonna kind of position it in there. And I'm just gonna be very careful that when I put it in the I/O shield, these prongs that are coming out, they need to rest on every top flat spot here. They need to, all those prongs need to touch the top. If one goes inside of a USB port or inside of another port, you're gonna have major issues. So you don't wanna do that. So I'm gonna try not to do that. All right, so I'm done with that piece. And now kind of gonna just position it in here. I always try to do this. Oh, that's not good. My CPU fan just budged. It's definitely secure now. If you look underneath, all 4 of the posts are coming through. They look good. Okay, so now we can try and put that back in again. All right. So it's in there pretty good. I'm just checking now to make sure everything lines up okay before I start putting screws in, and it does look good. So everywhere in there is good. The I/O shield placed okay. There's nothing going into any of my ports. So I'm gonna go ahead and mount it. I don't know if there's enough case screws to do this, but I usually like to use those. So I'm gonna use as many as I can. And again, that's the one with the hexagon top. You'll see again that I've got a magnetic screwdriver, so just be very careful if you use anything like that. You just want to not miss when you put it in, but it does work really well. Just be careful you don't touch anything with it. Also, I always like to do the kind of the middle screws or the end screws first, and then work my way in on the board. Okay, so I've got all the screws in there, so now I can kind of finish the other little ports like this USB 3.0, which is from the front. There's that. The chassis fan, like that. You can go ahead and do the power. So this is always keyed, which is nice. Can't really mess this up too bad. Back in the day, there was these power connectors called AT instead of ATX, and it was 2 different pieces, kind of like this, except they were flatter. And if you reversed those, if you put one on one side and the other on the other side, if you flipped them, you would actually blow something on the board when you turned it on. So it was always really important that you got that right, but nowadays it's not as bad. So there's our power. And there's going to be another one here. There's going to be one for the video card, and also usually another spot. So I'm just looking for that. Let's see. And I might as well run power to my drive. Okay, so this is going to go power my disk drive. All right, I'm going to go ahead and mount the SSD drive. Super lightweight. It's as though it's not even there. I don't have an SSD carriage or adapter to basically put this in. I'm just going to mount it on the side. So again, it's not something that everybody wants to do, but that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to actually put it up on this top bay and just confirm. So this one does use the fine thread screws. The SSD drive will. So you go and put it right here. Okay, just going to tighten it up. Now again, normally you would not mount that like that, but I don't really care. It'll work fine. Okay, so now I'm going to hook up the power to that one, which I can just use right off of this. There we go. So I've got power to the DVD and power to the drive. What I'm going to do is, looks like 1 and 2 is right here. So that's what I'm going to hook up. Also, these SATA cables are awesome. The ones that lock like that and make that clicking sound, they are nice, because I've had issues with SATA cables, the cheap ones, where they just kind of slide off. And yeah, it's kind of nice to not have to worry about that. There it is, and then this one's going to go to the DVD. That's it. I am going to put a couple screws in here just because I've got extra, and I don't know, I don't really like it kind of. I want it to be a little bit firmer than these little plastic things, whatever these are. Just because there's little fancy doohickeys that hold the drives in doesn't mean you should use them. I mean, the old Dells and old HPs were notorious for having these crazy things. So you just kind of want to, if possible, it's fine to use regular screws. Imagine that. All right. So everything's got power. The only thing that we have to do now is hook up that video card and then do some zip tie stuff, and we're good. Time to unbox the beast. There we go. There we go. Look at that. Oh my God. Look at this crazy sticker. Like, are you kidding me? EVGA enthusiast built. I mean, that's a little insane. What am I going to put that in my car or something? That's going in the motherboard box. Wow, they're doing some heavy promotion. Look at this. This is an entire poster. Entire EVGA poster. Stand for ownage. I know you can't see that whole thing, but it's a giant freaking poster. It's pretty cool. Got our manual. Got a badge, another case badge. This one looks pretty nice actually. It's like metal. So that's cool. A little fan diagram. The fans will not turn on until they're needed to cool the card. So apparently don't worry when the fans don't spin up. All this other crap. Boy, that's a lot of crap. All right, so here's some kind of power adapter in case you don't have the right power supply, I believe. This is a DVI to VGA adapter, which basically gives you digital video out that's similar to HDMI from another port on the card. And then this is another type of splitter. And that's really goofy, but that's how it works. There's the first one that we don't need anymore. And we'll need the second one removed right underneath it as well. And that one's going to require actually bending the metal to get it to come out. Back on the old cases, you would seriously injure yourself doing this, which really sucked. You would basically cut yourself if the case was real cheap, as opposed to having one with rolled steel, which this one does. So this one seems to be pretty good. So there's that other crappy piece. That's total garbage. And then now for the card. So completely wicked. So one thing I can tell you is that I'm looking at the power requirements on here, and I've only got one of those. So I am going to have to use the adapter to get the extra power needed to run this card. I want to take the sticker off because I don't like it, but it says warranty void if removed, so I'm not going to do that. I am going to remove this protective film, just like that. Also going to remove the PCI X slot cover, like that. So now that's exposed. This would be if I was using Sly. I'm not, so I'm going to leave that on. These covers can all come off, but it really just depends on which ones I want to use. In this case, it really doesn't matter which one you use, but I'm gonna uncover that one because that's gonna be my primary video out. Oh, bum deal. So I actually removed the wrong slot, the wrong part there. So I gotta take this back out. Take this piece, put it back where it came from, which is nice, that's there. And then it's a simple replacement as opposed to the one that I had to break out of there. So now I gotta break the second one out, which it's always easier to use a screwdriver for. So just so you know. And then just work it till it breaks out. Okay. So now I'm ready to put this in. And that's it. Just put it in like that. There is a spot here for a screw, so I'm going to go ahead and use that, but it's going to be the fine thread screw for this particular case. That could be different for your case. So now I'm going to put this piece back on. There, now that thing's not coming out of there very easily. With that done, we can go and take this one piece from the power supply and give ourselves some power. And I'm actually going to wrap it around this a little bit. And then I'm going to need one of these adapters. And these are called Molex connectors, these power connectors here. So I just need two of those. So here's one. Oh, and actually this one has two. This one has 3 Molex connectors, so I'm actually going to use that one instead. And that way I can just tie that one up and not worry about it. Oh, and you know what else I'm going to do too is I am going to give it a little twist here. Kind of just wrap it around. Okay, so our computer is built. We are literally ready to turn it on. I don't think I'm missing anything. You can go through and just kind of check to see if anything is missing, but really everything's good. Everything's mounted right. I'm gonna go and do some zip tie stuff on it. Oh, here's our chassis fan, so I can go ahead and plug that in. Apparently this chassis fan has a light as well, which is, you know, whatever. All right, so the idea is when you do zip tying that you just want to kind of keep everything out of airflow and fans, and that's really the whole point of it. So I'll go ahead and do that. And I've got 2 different sizes here. I've got the smaller ones and the thicker ones. Most of this I can do with the small ones. So anything like this, you kind of just like fold it up the best you can. Kind of like that. And you really want to try and get as many things in it as possible before you tie it up. And I like to have twisting going on as well on all my stuff. I just like it like that. Always have. Long time ago, a computer guy who I was learning from told me that when you twist it, the power actually flows better, which I've never really validated. That might not be true, I don't know, but he said it did. He said it mattered, so I've always gone with that. And everything else looks clear, but I'm just going to add some more twist ties here. So you never want to do them too tight either. Okay, so I feel pretty good about that. I'm gonna go ahead and trim them up. Last thing you want to do is cut a wire now. So always be careful. All right, so there you have it. There's the system ready to go. Let's check all the connections one last time. Oh, I can do one more zip tie here. So we're ready. All right, so feast your eyes on this baby. Look at it, check it out. It looks a lot like a stormtrooper, doesn't it? So now we're done and it's completely assembled. It's working great. It's running cool, which is great. And you know, I got Windows 7 64-bit installed, put Service Pack 1 on there, and now I'm actually installing Grand Theft Auto 5 right now. So it's hooked up to my other computer basically, and so that computer can record it, which is awesome, and it'll be able to do 60 frames per second at 1080p if I want, but I'll most likely just be doing 720p for now, although who knows, I might change that at some point just because I can. And like I said, this thing should be powerful enough to where it can actually play Grand Theft Auto 5 and hopefully record it at 60 frames per second, but at this point I have to transition all my video editing software and all that stuff over to this thing, so it's going to take some time, but I really dig this case, and you know, I couldn't be happier with it actually. So I'm really stoked on it. So thanks for watching this video. I know that it was kind of a long one, but you know, hopefully you found it informative. And you know, there's gonna be lots more videos coming from a repair standpoint and tinkering in the garage with different arcade machines and pinball and all that kind of stuff. But you know, this one's pretty important because I really did want to get Grand Theft Auto 5 running on it. And also, you know, some other games as they come out, you know, and just be able to play them and not worry about my computer struggling, you know, which is just, you know, kind of one of the things that you have to deal with as a PC gamer. And whether that's, you know, freaking 1996, you know, same thing, like back then when it was like, you know, Pentium 133s and stuff like that, you still would play a game like Tomb Raider, for example, and have it be really choppy, and the only thing you could do is get a 3D effects card. And anyway, it's just a cycle. It just keeps going and going. But I will say this, that there's a sweet spot in my heart for PCs and the games that run on PCs, and there always will be, because that's honestly what pushed me into gaming so hard, and computers. And really, that's something that I've just been doing for, yeah, since like 1996 professionally, and before that I've been tinkering with them. And so anyway, I love PC gaming, I always will. And even though this channel is retro game players, you know, you're gonna find lots of modern games on here too, which is pretty obvious with Grand Theft Auto 5 sitting there. But anyway, thanks so much for watching, and you know, if you found this to be interesting or whatever, if you dug it, please give me a thumbs up, I appreciate it. And thanks for subscribing so much, I really, really appreciate that too. So until next time, keep it retro, unless you're playing on an Intel i7 Grand Theft Auto V.